other witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" And they all condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him and to cover his face, to strike him, saying, "Prophecy." And the guards received him with blows. Now jump down just one little section. We'll go to chapter 15, and we're going to pick up on a second trial. So that trial's ended, and then Jesus is taken by the Sanhedrin, by the high priest, to Pontius Pilate. And that's where the next trial is. In verse 1 of chapter 15, it says this: "And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' And Jesus answered him, 'You have said so.' And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him, 'Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you.' But Jesus made no further answer, so Pilate was amazed." So we have Jesus on trial before two groups, the religious leaders and the regional leader. The religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, the scribes, the elders, and the regional leader, Pilate, who was Rome's representative in that area. There are differences between the two trials, but there's similarities as well. One thing that we notice in this is that Jesus was mostly silent. Jesus was silent during this time. Another thing that we recognize is that when he spoke, Jesus only said a few words. He'd make his S2 happy, I'm pretty sure, because Jesus only answered specific things and specific answers, and he was pretty vague as he responded to the Sanhedrin and to Pilate. But above all, we see that Jesus remained faithful to his mission. Jesus remained faithful in his mission as he moved through these trials, no matter what they were throwing against him. All of these things, they set the table for Jesus to receive a verdict and that he's sent for execution. On this side of the passion, where you and I are, we know that it set the table for our redemption. And more than anything, that's the powerful concept that I want us to receive today. And we're going to look at it a little bit closer in the 3 points that I have for us this morning. You got to forgive me. I'm a Baptist. We speak in alliteration and we speak in points. Just do know, friends, that I'm a recovering Baptist, all right? But I still can't get some of the Baptistic nature out of me. And I've got just 3 points for us today. 3 simple points. You've seen them already, and we're going to walk through them a little bit closer. The first one is this: Jesus remained silent because there was no confession to be made. Jesus remained silent because there was no confession to be made. Now, I haven't spent a whole time around really guilty people, all right? I'm a medical chaplain and I'm an army chaplain. I'm not a prison chaplain. All right, so I've never been around guilty people a whole lot until I started having kids. My kids are the worst criminals on earth, and they live right inside my house, so I'm around guilty people all the time. And the reason I know this is that when I confront them about the crimes that they've committed against their brother or sister, their mom, their dad, the house as a whole, or our next door neighbor, because my youngest son likes to go over and ring their doorbell and run away across the yard back to my house. See, I'm around guilty people a lot. But when I confront them, they do something that is the guilty silence. They get silent when they know they're really guilty. Did you do this to your brother? Did you say this to your sister? Are your grades really this bad? I go to my youngest, did you really knock on the door of the lady next door again? And they don't say anything back. Why? Because they're guilty. They get silent because they're guilty. That's not the case with Jesus here. Jesus is pretty quiet in these trials. Jesus is pretty silent in these trials because, not from guilt, but because he has nothing to say in this. There's no confession to be made. He is not caught red-handed. He's not like me with the police in Chattanooga. He's not dead to rights. That's not the case here. We see, as we read through Matthew 14 and Matthew 15, the testimonies didn't match up. Did you notice that as we read it? They didn't match up. They couldn't get some of the witnesses to even show up because there weren't any. The evidence was inconsistent. Some would say this and some would say that. We hear in there that it says they're going, the witnesses that did show up said, Jesus said he was going to destroy the temple. When in case, that's not the fact. In John chapter 2, Jesus said he would raise the temple up. So even the testimonies, even the witnesses that are showing up, they're not jiving. So Jesus has no confession to make towards this, so he remains silent. Jesus is innocent of the things that they're saying to him. But because he was silent, the Sanhedrin was able to say, you're committing blasphemy. And then they drag Jesus to Pilate, and they say to Pilate that this man is seeking to be a revolutionary. He wants to bring insurrection to Rome. So Jesus gets, for his silence, 2 verdicts: blasphemy and insurrection. And through it all, Jesus remains silent. Not in his guilt, but in the truth of who he was. Because Jesus was the high priest. Jesus is the high priest, according to Hebrews chapter 4. He's the one who is to judge, not to be judged. He is the high priest, not sitting in front of these guys who said they were the high priest. Jesus is the Son of God. The high priest asked him that. The Sanhedrin asked him that. Are you truly the Son of God? Are you the one blessed by God? And when he says he is, they tear their robes and they say, there's no more witnesses, no more evidence needed. You've committed blasphemy. But we know that Jesus is the Son of God. How do we know it? Well, the New Testament speaks to it. Acts chapter 2, verse 13, Colossians chapter 2, verse 9, both give testimony that Jesus is the Son of God. The Gospels in Matthew chapter 3, Mark chapter 1, Luke chapter 3. When Jesus is baptized, God, the original big voice, speaks up and says, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. So when the Sanhedrin pronounced blasphemy, Jesus stays silent because he never committed such a religious crime. He's not guilty of such. There's no confession that he needs to make. The truth is that the Sanhedrin ultimately didn't consider the one option that Jesus was speaking the truth. They threw all kinds of evidence and witnesses against him, but the reality is they didn't consider one bit that maybe he was being truthful and honest. And when Pilate condemned Jesus for trying to usurp Rome, Jesus stayed silent as well. The one option that maybe Pilate didn't consider, that he maybe fatally disregarded, is that Jesus was indeed the way, the truth, the life. That Jesus was indeed the King. So for Jesus, there was nothing to confess. No matter what the Sanhedrin, no matter what Pilate asked of him in these 2 trials, there was nothing for him to confess. So he remained silent. But he wasn't silent all the way. He did speak in both trials. He did speak up. Four words he said to Pilate, 24 words he said to the Sanhedrin. So he did speak a little bit. And that's because, our second point today, Jesus spoke only truth because he was the confirmation. I was a member of a gym for a long time. I know it's hard to believe because you see my incredible physique and figure. But I was a member of a gym, and if you've ever been a member of a gym, you know you get into those contracts, they are hard to break. They're absolutely hard to break. So I dug in deep because I wanted to leave the gym I was at. They were charging me too much, and I was going to move to a newer gym that was newer and cheaper. So I read my contract, and I knew how much longer I had to live out on that contract. I knew how much longer I had to go before I could fully break that contract. So the day comes, that literally the day that I can get out of the contract, I show up at the gym and I said, I need to break my contract. And they said, well, that's fine. They tried to talk me back into it, tried to change the price. I said, I'm done. I don't want to be a member here anymore. And then they said, well, you've got to go get a certified letter and you've got to send it to our headquarters. I said, what? I said, I've been a member here for 8 years. The contract says I can. I said, no, you got to do a certified letter. So I go do the certified letter. I bring the certified letter back to them, and I said, I've sent it to you, to your headquarters. I'm giving it to you guys. And I said, as soon as that's done, I'm done. And then as I was leaving, I decided that it was time for me to fully confess, fully confirm what I've been doing all along. And I had to have one last word on this gym that had taken advantage of me for too long. As I was walking out the door, hand to God, true story, I turned back and I said, yeah, I'm the one farting on the treadmills every weekday at 7 to 8 in the morning. And then I stormed out because I had that final word. I confirmed the truth. that I was the one farting on the treadmills. They had probably wondered for 8 years. Now they knew, and I walked out with my head held high and joined a new gym where I fart on those treadmills in the morning now too. But hey, I won't confess that until I have to break that contract. There's power in speaking the truth. I had power over my gym, and finally being able to say I was the one doing that. I hid it for years. Now I can finally walk out. There's power in truth. So when Jesus speaks up, thank goodness he's not confessing to farting on the treadmills like your very failed chaplain. When Jesus speaks up at both of these trials, he's confirming the truth of who he is. He's confirming the power that he has, because there is